Chapter 3. Malta Kano's hat, Sherbet Tone, and Allen Ginsberg and the Crusaders. I was in the middle of preparing lunch when the phone rang again. I had cut 2 slices of bread, spread them with butter and mustard, filled them with tomato slices and cheese, set the whole on the cutting board, and I was just about to cut it in half when the bell started ringing. I let the phone ring 3 times and cut the sandwich in half. Then I transferred it to a plate, wiped the knife, and put that in the cutlery drawer, before pouring myself a cup of the coffee I had warmed up. Still the phone went on ringing, maybe 15 times. I gave up and took it. I would have preferred not to answer, but it might have been Kumiko. "Hello," said a woman's voice, one I had never heard before. It belonged neither to Kumiko nor to the strange woman who had called me the other day when I was cooking spaghetti. "I wonder if I might possibly be speaking with Mr. Toru Okada?" said the voice, as if its owner were reading a text. "You are," I said. "The husband of Kumiko Okada?" "That's right," I said. "Kumiko Okada is my wife." "And Mrs. Okada's elder brother is Noboru Wataya?" "Right again," I said, with admirable self-control. "Noboru Wataya is my wife's elder brother." "Sir, my name is Kano." I waited for her to go on. The sudden mention of Kumiko's elder brother had put me on guard. With the blunt end of the pencil that lay by the phone, I scratched the back of my neck. 5 seconds or more went by, in which the woman said nothing. No sound of any kind came from the receiver, as if the woman had covered the mouthpiece with her hand and was talking with someone nearby. "Hello," I said, concerned now. "Please forgive me, sir," blurted the woman's voice. "In that case, I must ask your permission to call you at a later time." "No, wait a minute," I said. "This is—" At that point, the connection was cut. I stared at the receiver, then put it in my ear again. No doubt about it, the woman had hung up. Vaguely dissatisfied, I turned to the kitchen table, drank my coffee, and ate my sandwich. Until the moment the telephone rang, I had been thinking of something, but now I couldn't remember what it was. Knife in my right hand, poised to cut the sandwich in half, I had definitely been thinking of something. Something important. Something I had been trying unsuccessfully to recall for the longest time. It had come to me at the very moment when I was about to cut the sandwich in two, but now it was gone. Chewing on my sandwich, I tried hard to bring it back, but it didn't come. It had returned to that dark region of my mind where it had been living until that moment. I finished eating and was clearing the dishes when the phone rang again. This time I took it right away. Again I heard a woman saying, "Hello," but this time it was Kumiko. "How are you?" she asked. "Finished lunch?" "Yup." "What do you have?" "Nothing," she said. "Too busy. I'll probably buy myself a sandwich later." "What do you have?" I described my sandwich. "I see," she said, without a hint of envy. "Oh, and by the way, I forgot to tell you this morning. You're going to get a call from Miss Kano." "She already called," I said, "a few minutes ago. All she did was mention our names, mine and yours and your brother's, and hang up. Never said what she wanted. What was that all about?" "She hung up? Said she'd call again." "Well, when she does, I want you to do whatever she asks. This is really important. I think you'll have to go see her." "When? Today?" "What's wrong? Do you have something planned? Are you supposed to see someone?" "Nope, no plans. Not yesterday, not today, not tomorrow. No plans at all." "But who is this Kano woman? And what does she want with me? I'd like to have some idea before she calls again. If it's about a job for me connected with her brother, forget it. I don't want to have anything to do with him. You know that." "No, it has nothing to do with the job," she said, with a hint of annoyance. "It's about the cat." "The cat?" "Oh, sorry. I've got to run. Somebody's waiting for me. I really shouldn't have taken the time to make this call. Like I said, I haven't even had lunch. Mind if I hang up? I'll get back to you as soon as I'm free." "Look, I know how busy you are, but give me a break. I want to know what's going on. What's with the cat? Is this Kano woman—" Just do what she tells you, will you please? Understand? This is serious business. I want you to stay home and wait for her call. Gotta go." And she went. When the phone rang at 2:30, I was napping on the couch. At first, I thought I was hearing the alarm clock. I reached out to push the button, but the clock was not there. I wasn't in bed, but was on the couch, and it wasn't morning but afternoon. I got up and went to the phone. "Hello," I said. Hello, said a woman's voice. It was the woman who had called in the morning. Mr. Toru Okada? That's me, Toru Okada. Sir, my name is Kano, she said. The lady who called before. That is correct. I'm afraid I was terribly rude. But tell me, Mr. Okada, would you by any chance be free this afternoon? You might say that. Well, in that case, I know this is terribly sudden, but do you think it might be possible for us to meet? When? Today? Now? Yes. I looked at my watch. Not that I really had to. I had looked at it 30 seconds earlier, but just to make sure, and it was still 2:30. Will it take long? I asked. Not very long, I think. I could be wrong though. At this moment in time, it is difficult for me to say with complete accuracy. I am sorry. No matter how long it might take, I had no choice. Kumiko had told me to do as the woman said, that it was serious business. If she said it was serious business, then it was serious business, and I had better do as I was told. I see, I said. Where should we meet? Would you by any chance be acquainted with the Pacific Hotel across from Shinagawa Station? I would. There is a tea room on the first floor. I shall be waiting there for you at 4 o'clock if that would be all right with you, sir. Fine, I said. I am 31 years old and shall be wearing a red vinyl hat. Terrific. There was something weird about the way this woman talked, something that confused me momentarily. But I could not have said exactly what made it so weird. Nor was there any law against a 31-year-old woman's wearing a red vinyl hat. I see, I said. I'm sure I'll find you. I wonder, Mr. Okada, if you would be so kind as to tell me of any external distinguishing characteristics in your own case. I tried to think of any external distinguishing characteristics I might have. Did I in fact have any? I am 30. I am 5'9", 140 pounds, short hair, no glasses. It occurred to me as I listed these for her that they hardly constituted external distinguishing characteristics. There could be 50 such men in the Pacific Hotel tea room. I had been there before, and it was a big place. She needed something more noticeable, but I couldn't think of anything, which is not to say that I didn't have any distinguishing characteristics. I owned a signed copy of Miles Davis' Sketches of Spain. I had a slow resting pulse rate, 47 normally, and no higher than 70 with a high fever. I was out of work. I knew the names of all the brothers Karamazov, but none of these distinguishing characteristics were external. What might you be wearing? She asked. I don't know, I said. I haven't decided yet. This is so sudden. Then please wear a polka dot necktie, she said decisively. Do you think you might have a polka dot necktie, sir? I think so, I said. I had a navy blue tie with tiny cream polka dots. Kumiko had given it to me for my birthday a few years earlier. Please be so kind as to wear it then, she said. Thank you for agreeing to meet me at 4 o'clock. And she hung up. I opened the wardrobe and looked for my polka dot tie. There was no sign of it on the tie rack. I looked in all the drawers. I looked in all the clothes storage boxes in the closet. No polka dot tie. There was no way that the tie could be in our house without my finding it. Kumiko was such a perfectionist when it came to the arrangement of our clothes. My necktie couldn't possibly be in a place other than where it was normally kept. And in fact, I found everything, both her clothes and mine, in perfect order. My shorts were neatly folded in the drawer where they belonged. My sweaters were in boxes so full of mothballs, my eyes hurt just from opening the lid. One box contained the clothing she had worn in high school, a navy uniform, a flowered mini dress, preserved like photos in an old album. What was the point of keeping such things? Perhaps she had simply brought them with her because she had never found a suitable opportunity to get rid of them. Or maybe she was planning to send them to Bangladesh, or donate them someday as cultural artifacts. In any case, my polka dot necktie was nowhere to be found. Hand on the wardrobe door, I tried to recall the last time I had worn the tie. It was a rather stylish tie, in very good taste, but a bit too much for the office. If I had worn it to the firm, somebody would have gone on and on about it at lunch, praising the collar or its sharp looks, which would have been a kind of warning. In the firm I worked for, it was not good to be complimented on a choice of tie, so I had never worn it there. Rather, I put it on for more private, if somewhat formal occasions. A concert or dinner at a good restaurant when Kumiko wanted us to dress properly. Not that there were so many such occasions. The tie went well with my navy suit, and she was very fond of it. Still, I couldn't manage to recall it when I had last worn it. I scanned the contents of the wardrobe again and gave up. For one reason or another, the polka dot tie had disappeared. Oh well, I put on my navy suit with a blue shirt and a striped tie. I wasn't too worried. She might not be able to spot me, but all I had to do was look for a 30ish woman in a red vinyl hat. Dressed to go out, I sat on the sofa, staring at the wall. It had been a long time since I last wore a suit. Normally, this three-season navy suit would have been a bit too heavy for this time of year, but that particular day was a rainy one, and there was a chill in the air. It was the very suit I had worn on my last day of work in April. Suddenly, it occurred to me that there might be something in one of the pockets. In the inside breast pocket, I found a receipt with a date from last autumn. It was some kind of taxi receipt, one I could have been reimbursed for at the office. Now, though, it was too late. I crumpled it up and threw it into the wastebasket. I had not worn this suit once since quitting 2 months earlier. Now, after such a long interval, I felt as if I were in a grip of a foreign substance. I was heavy and stiff and seemed not to match the contours of my body. I stood and walked around the room, stopping in front of the mirror to yank at the sleeves and the coattails in an attempt to make it fit better. I stretched out my arms, took a deep breath, and bent forward at the waist, checking to see if my physical shape might have changed in the past few months. I sat on the sofa again, but still felt uncomfortable. Now, however, just sitting on the couch in a suit felt like some kind of immoral act, like faking one's curriculum vitae or passing a woman. Overcome with something very like a guilty conscience, I found it increasingly difficult to breathe. I went to the front hall, took my brown shoes from their place on the shelf, and pried myself into them with a shoehorn. A thin film of dust clung to them. As it turned out, I didn't have to find the woman. She found me. When I arrived at the tea room, I did a quick circuit, looking for the red hat. There were no women with red hats. My watch showed 10 minutes left until 4 o'clock. I took a seat, drank the water they brought me, and ordered a cup of coffee. No sooner had the waitress left by the table than I heard a woman behind me singing, "You must be Mr. Toru Okada." Surprised, I spun around. Not 3 minutes had gone by since my survey of the room. Under a white jacket, she wore a yellow silk blouse, and on her head was a red vinyl hat. By reflex action, I stood and faced her. Beautiful was a word that might well have applied to her. At least she was far more beautiful than I had imagined from her telephone voice. She had a slim, lovely build and was sparing in her use of cosmetics. She knew how to dress, except for the red hat. Her jacket and blouse were finely tailored. On the collar of the jacket shone a gold brooch in the shape of a feather. She could have been taken for a corporate secretary. Why, after having lavished such care on the rest of her outfit, she would have topped it off with that totally inappropriate red vinyl hat was beyond me. Maybe she always wore it to help people spot her in situations like this. In that case, it was not a bad idea. If the point was to have her stand out in a room full of strangers, it certainly did its job. She took the seat across the table from mine, and I sat down again. "I'm amazed you knew it was me," I said. "I couldn't find my polka dot tie. I know, I've got it somewhere, but it just wouldn't turn up, which is why I wore this striped one. I figured I'd find you. But how did you know it was me?" "Of course I knew it was you," she said, putting her white patent leather bag on the table. She took off her red vinyl hat and placed it over the bag, covering it completely. I had the feeling she was about to perform a magic trick. When she lifted the hat, the bag would have vanished. "But I was wearing the wrong tie," I protested. "The wrong tie?" She glanced at my tie with a puzzled expression, as if to say, "What is this odd person talking about?" Then she nodded. "It doesn't matter. Please don't be concerned." There was something strange about her eyes. They were mysteriously lacking in depth. They were lovely eyes, but they did not seem to be looking at anything. They were all surface, like glass eyes. But of course, they were not glass eyes. They moved, and their lids blinked. How had she been able to pick me out of the crowd in this busy tea room? Virtually every chair in this place was taken, and many of them were occupied by men my age. I wanted to ask her for an explanation, but I restrained myself. Better not raise irrelevant issues. She called to a passing waiter and asked for a Perrier. They had no Perrier, he said, but he could bring her tonic water. She thought about this for a moment and accepted his suggestion. While she waited for her tonic water to arrive, she said nothing, and I did the same. At one point, she lifted her red head and opened the clasps of the pocketbook underneath. From the bag, she removed a glossy black leather case, somewhat smaller than a cassette tape. It was a business card holder. Like the bag, it had a clasp. The first card holder I had ever seen with a clasp. She drew a card from the case and handed it to me. I reached into my breast pocket for one of my own cards, only then realizing that I did not have any with me. Her name card was made of a thin plastic, and it seemed to carry a light fragrance of incense. When I brought it closer to my nose, the smell grew more distinct. No doubt about it, it was incense. The card bore a single line of small, intensely black letters. Malta Kano. Malta? I turned the card over. It was blank. While I sat there wondering about the meaning of this name card, the waiter came and placed an ice-filled glass in front of her, then filled it halfway with tonic water. The glass had a wedge of lemon in it. The waitress came with a silver-colored coffee pot on a tray. She placed a cup in front of me and poured it full of coffee. With the furtive movements of someone slipping an unlucky shrine fortune into someone else's hand, she eased the bill onto the table and left. "It's blank," Malta Kano said to me. I was still staring at the back of her name card. "Just my name. There is no need for me to include my address or telephone number. No one ever calls me. I'm the one who makes the calls." "I see," I said. The meaningless response hovered in the air above the table like the floating island in Gulliver's Travels. Holding her glass in both hands, she took one sip through a straw. The hint of a frown crossed her face, after which she thrust the glass aside as if she had lost all interest in it. "Malta is not my real name," said Malta Kano. "The Kano is real, but the Malta is a professional name. I took from the island of Malta. Have you ever been to Malta, Mr. Okata?" I said I had not. I had never been to Malta, and I had no plans to go to Malta in the near future. It had never even crossed my mind to go there. All I knew about Malta was the Herb Alpert performance of The Sands of Malta, an authentic stinker of a song. "I once lived in Malta," she said, "for 3 years. The water there is terrible, undrinkable, like diluted seawater. And the bread they bake there is salty, not because they put salt in it, but the water they make it with is salty. The bread is not bad though. I rather like Malta's bread." I nodded and sipped my coffee. "As bad as it tastes, the water from one particular place on Malta has a wonderful influence on the body's elements. It is very special, even mystical water, and it is available in only the one place on the island, the spring in the mountains, and you have to climb several hours from a village at the base to get there. The water cannot be transported from the site of the spring. If it is taken elsewhere, it loses its power. The only way you can drink it is to go there by yourself. It is mentioned in documents from the time of the Crusades. They called it spirit water. Allen Ginsberg once came there to drink it. So did Keith Richards. I lived there for 3 years. In the little village at the foot of the mountain, I raised vegetables and learned weaving. I climbed to the spring every day and drank the special water. From 1976 to 1979, once for a whole week, I drank only that water and ate no food. You must not put anything but that water in your mouth for an entire week. This is a kind of discipline that is required there. I believe it can be called a religious austerity. In this way, you purify your body. For me, it was a truly wonderful experience. This is how I came to choose the name Malta for professional purposes when I returned to Japan." "May I ask what your profession is?" She shook her head. "It is not my profession, properly speaking. I do not take money for what I do. I am a consultant. I talk with people about the elements of the body. I am also engaged in research on water that has beneficial effects on the elements of the body. Making money is not a problem for me. I have whatever assets I need. My father is a doctor, and he has given my younger sister and myself stocks and real estate in a kind of living trust. An accountant manages them for us. They produce a decent income each year. I have also written several books that bring in a little income. My work on the elements of the body is an entirely non-profit activity, which is why my card bears neither address nor telephone number. I am the one who makes the calls." I nodded, but this was simply a physical movement of the head. I had no idea what she was talking about. I could understand each of the words she spoke, but it was impossible for me to grasp their overall meaning. Elements of the body? Allen Ginsberg? I became increasingly uneasy. I'm not one of those people with special intuitive gifts, but the more time I spent with this woman, the more I seemed to smell trouble. You'll have to pardon me, I said, but I wonder if I could ask you to explain things from the beginning, step by step. I talked to my wife a little while ago, and all she said was that I should see you and talk to you about our missing cat. To be entirely honest, I don't really get the point of what you've just been telling me. Does it have anything to do with the cat? Yes, indeed, she said. But before I go into that, there is something I would like you to know, Mr. Okada. She opened the metal clasp of her pocketbook again and took out a white envelope. In the envelope was a photograph, which she handed to me. My sister, she said. It was a color snapshot of two women. One was Malta Kano, and in the photo, too, she was wearing a hat, a yellow knit hat. Again, it was ominously mismatched with her outfit. Her sister, I assume this was the younger sister whom she mentioned, wore a pastel-colored suit and a matching hat of the kind that had been popular in the early 60s. I seem to recall that such colors had been known as sherbet tone back then. One thing was certain, however, these sisters were fond of hats. The hairstyle of the younger one was precisely that of Jacqueline Kennedy in her White House days, loaded with hairspray. She wore a little too much makeup, but she could be fairly described as beautiful. She was in her early to mid-20s. I handed the photo back to Malta Kano, who returned it to its envelope and the envelope to the handbag, shutting the clasp. My sister is 5 years my junior, she said. She was defiled by Noboru Wataya, violently raped. Terrific. I wanted to get the hell out of there, but I couldn't just stand up and walk away. I took a handkerchief from my jacket pocket, wiped my mouth with it, and returned it to the same pocket. Then I cleared my throat. That's terrible, I said. I don't know anything about this, but if he did hurt your sister, you have my heartfelt condolences. I must tell you, however, that my brother-in-law and I have virtually nothing to do with each other. So if you're expecting some kind of... Not at all, Mr. Okada, she declared. I do not hold you responsible in any way. If there is someone who should be held responsible for what happened, that person is myself. For being inattentive. For not having protected her as I should have. Unfortunately, certain events made it impossible for me to do so. These things can happen, Mr. Okada. As you know, we live in a violent and chaotic world. And within this world, there are places that are still more violent, still more chaotic. Do you understand what I mean, Mr. Okada? What has happened has happened. My sister will recover from her wounds, from her defilement. She must. Thank goodness they were not fatal. As I have said to my sister, the potential was there for something much, much worse to happen. What I am most concerned about is the elements of her body. Elements of her body, I said. This elements of the body business was obviously a consistent theme of hers. I cannot explain to you in detail how all these circumstances are related. It would be a very long and very complicated story, and although I mean no disrespect to you when I say this, it would be virtually impossible for you at this stage, Mr. Okada, to attain an accurate understanding of the true meaning of that story, which involves a world that we deal with on a professional basis. I did not invite you here in order to voice any complaint to you in that regard. You are, of course, in no way responsible for what has happened. I simply wanted you to know that. Although it may be a temporary condition, my sister's elements have been defiled by Mr. Wataya. You and she are likely to have some form of contact with each other sometime in the future. She is my assistant, as I mentioned earlier. At such time, it would probably be best for you to be aware of what occurred between her and Mr. Wataya and to realize that these things can happen. A short silence followed. Malta Kano looked at me as if to say, Please think about what I have told you. And so I did. About Noboru Wataya's having raped Malta Kano's sister, about the relationship between that and the elements of the body, and about the relationship between those and the disappearance of our cat. Do I understand you to be saying, I ventured, that neither you nor your sister intends to bring a formal complaint on this matter to go to the police? No, of course, we will do no such thing, said Malta Kano, her face expressionless. Properly speaking, we do not hold anyone responsible. We would simply like to have a more precise idea of what caused such a thing to happen. Until we solve this question, this is a real possibility that something even worse could occur. I felt a degree of relief on hearing this. Not that it would have bothered me in the least if Noboru Wataya had been convicted of rape and sent to prison. It couldn't happen to a nicer guy. But Kumiko's brother was a rather well-known figure. His arrest and trial would be certain to make the headlines, and that would be a terrible shock for Kumiko. If only for my own mental health, I preferred the whole thing to go away. Rest assured, said Malta Kano. I asked to see you today purely about the missing cat. That was the matter about which Mr. Wataya sought my advice. Mrs. Okada had consulted him on the matter, and he in turn consulted me. That explained a lot. Malta Kano was some kind of a clairvoyant or channeler or something, and they had consulted her on the whereabouts of the cat. The Wataya family was into this kind of stuff, divination and house physiognomy and such. That was fine with me. People were free to believe anything they liked. But why did he have to go and rape the younger sister of his spiritual counselor? Why stir up a lot of pointless trouble? Is that your area of expertise? I asked. Helping people find things? She stared at me with those deathless eyes of her, eyes that looked as if they were staring into the window of a vacant house. Judging from their expression, she had failed to grasp the meaning of my question. Without answering the question, she said, You live in a very strange place, don't you, Mr. Okada? I do, I said. Strange in what way? Instead of replying, she pushed her neatly untouched glass of tonic water another 6 or 8 inches away from herself. Cats are very sensitive creatures, you know. Another silence descended on the two of us. So our place is strange and cats are sensitive animals, I said. Oh, but we've lived there for a long time, the two of us and the cat. Why now, all of a sudden, did it decide to leave us? Why didn't it leave before now? That I cannot tell you. Perhaps the flow has changed. Perhaps something has obstructed the flow. The flow. I do not know yet whether your cat is still alive. But I can be certain of one thing. It is no longer in the vicinity of your house. You will never find the cat in that neighborhood. I lifted my cup and took a sip of my now lukewarm coffee. Beyond the tea room windows, a misty rain was falling. The sky was closed over with dark, low-hanging clouds. A sad procession of people and umbrellas climbed up and down the footbridge outside. Give me your hand, she said. I placed my right hand on the table, palm up, assuming she was planning to read my palm. Instead, she stretched her hand out and put her palm against mine. Then she closed her eyes, remaining utterly still, as if silently rebuking a faithless lover. The waitress came and refilled my cup, pretending not to notice what Malta Kano and I were doing. People at nearby tables stole glances in our direction. I kept hoping all the while that there were no acquaintances of mine in the vicinity. I want you to picture to yourself one thing you saw before you came here today, said Malta Kano. One thing? I asked. Just one thing. I thought of the flowered mini dress that I had seen in Kumiko's clothes storage box. Why that of all the things happened to pop into my mind, I have no idea. It just did. We kept our hands together like that for another 5 minutes. 5 minutes that felt very long to me. Not so much because I was being stared at by people as that the touch of Malta Kano's hands had something unsettling about it. It was a small hand, neither hot nor cold. It had neither the intimate touch of a lover's hand nor the functional touch of a doctor's. It had the same effect on me as her eyes had, turning me into a vacant house. I felt empty. No furniture, no curtains, no rugs, just an empty container. Eventually, Malta Kano withdrew her hand from mine and took several deep breaths. Then she nodded several times. Mr. Okada, she said, I believe that you are entering a phase of your life in which many different things will occur. The disappearance of your cat is only the beginning. Different things, I said. Good things or bad things? She tilted her head in thought. Good things and bad things. Bad things that seem good at first, and good things that seem bad at first. To me, that sounds very general, I said. Don't you have any more concrete information? Yes, I suppose what I'm saying does sound very general, said Malta Kano. But after all, Mr. Okada, when one is speaking of the essence of things, it often happens that one can only speak in generalities. Concrete things certainly do command attention, but they are often little more than trivia, side trips. The more one tries to see into the distance, the more generalized things become. I nodded silently, without the slightest inkling of what she was talking about. Do I have your permission to call you again? She asked. Sure, I said, though in fact I had no wish to be called by anyone. Sure was about the only answer I could give. She snatched her red vinyl hat from the table, took the handbag that had been hidden beneath it, and stood up. Uncertain as to how I should respond to this, I remained seated. I do have one small bit of information that I can share with you, Malta Kano said, looking down at me after she had put on her red hat. You will find your polka dot tie, but not in your house.